If there's one thing I can say about 2025, it's that it was definitely the year of all time. My mental state was pretty rough throughout the second half of the year, especially in early June and mid-October, but there were still plenty of diamonds on the soles of her shoes. Wait, that's not right. There were plenty of diamonds in the rough, as it were. Whenever things conveniently went wrong, I tried to remember the old phrase, when one door closes, another door opens. As an example of that sort of situation playing out, I recall the morning of Sunday the 24th of August. On that day, I was over in the city of Hamilton, and initially mighty pissed off upon discovering that the miniature railway at Minogue Park conveniently wasn't running that day. Soon after the fact, I was lucky to get footage of DSG 3236 at work in the nearby Te Rapa yard, and we even found the electric multiple unit AM144 a long way from her home in Auckland. Since this footage was recorded, the AM has been transferred to Wellington for an apparent repaint. Later that day, we saw steam locomotive WW644 out on an excursion from Hamilton to Huntly and return, and got a shot of her crossing the Waikato River in Ngāruawāhia on her way back from Huntly. Little did I know that large fences would soon be installed on the bridge in an effort to keep people from trespassing and using the bridge as if it were a bloody diving board. As another example of the door closing / opening situation, I recall the events of Tuesday the 30th of December. On that day, we went over to the Waikato because we thought the M52 shunt to Hautapu and Waitoa was going to run. But it didn't. That and other flare-ups that I won't discuss left me feeling very angry. In the end, we just ended up filming 4 of the regular DL-hauled freight trains before making like Mark Knopfler and going home. On the way back, we were listening to a radio station called The Sound, not sponsored by the way, and amongst the weirdly worded voice breaks from Mark Smith, we heard the 2 Def Leppard songs that I actually like. The songs in question are Hysteria and Photograph. Later in the journey, we also heard them play the full album version of Heroes by David Bowie, and the weird thing was that I was in the middle of saying that I predicted that they would play Heroes and Space Oddity, but I didn't even get to say Space Oddity before Heroes came on. Talk about weirdly precise timing. Anyway, the one door that closed was the M52 shunt conveniently not running, I say conveniently with a hint of bitterness, and the other door that opened was getting to hear the pair of Def Leppard songs and David Bowie's Heroes. Mental health struggles aside, 2025 was characterised by good things that I previously thought impossible actually happening. All that was missing was an opportunity to meet Toni Basil. I bring up that idea despite knowing how unlikely it is. But speaking of Toni Basil, her 1983 song Over My Head is still special to me for reasons I've already discussed in previous videos, and it's still tied with Telegraph Road by Dire Straits as my favourite song of all time. Over My Head, and the album from which it came, are now 42 years old, and have aged very well if you ask me. As for Toni Basil herself, she is still going strong at 82 years old. As for unbelievable things that actually happened, besides the UK trip, there was my strengthened relationship with the Goldfields Railway in Wei He as a result of all the videos I made about their line. The crew gave me an honorary lifetime membership, something I never thought I'd get just from turning up at the station with a camera. Later in the year, I had the honour of being interviewed by maverick hunter Daniel, who I still consider to be one of my biggest influences when it comes to reviewing Train Simulator Classic and Train Sim World add-ons. Speaking of TS Classic, I was given DLC directly from two developers themselves, but to be clear, I did not ask for free DLC, nor would I ever want to do that sort of thing, and the videos were not sponsored. In one case, I was presented with the offer for a pre-release copy of a certain steam locomotive, while the other case was a generous gift of all the remaining DLC from the developer's catalogue that I didn't already own. I consider it a great honour to have my videos recognised by any developers. However, I do not take these connections for granted, nor do I let them go to my head. For me, I think the UK trip was perhaps the biggest "how in heaven's name did that actually happen" moment of 2025. I had known about the UK's railway system for many years, to the point where I didn't need to do any research about their motive power before heading over. As an aside, I was amazed when I saw that the 1983 pilot for Thomas the Tank Engine got released, and what's more, that came up on the very first day after we got back from England. As for major highlights from the trip, they were riding on the London Underground, particularly the Jubilee lines in 1996 stock to and from West Hampstead, a round of train spotting at Pimlico on the Victoria line, going to the little-used Sudbury and Harrow Road station in North London, visiting the Greenford branch in West London, riding aboard a Class 465 on the Bromley North branch in South London, going to the Didcot Railway Centre and seeing 4079 Pendennis Castle, not to mention other famous GWR steamers, train spotting in the little village of Haresfield, Gloucestershire, riding aboard the hilariously tiny Class 139 on the Stourbridge Town branch, visiting the world-famous National Railway Museum in York, riding aboard the Tyne and Wear Metro in the northeast, visiting multiple locations that I knew from Train Sim World's WCML Preston to Carlisle route, seeing former District Line trains, now rebuilt and designated as Class 230, running on the Borderlands line, staying a night in the Welsh seaside town of Llandudno, riding behind Peter Sam's basis on the world-famous Talyllyn Railway, seeing Southern Railway U-boat number 31806 on the Swanage Railway, train spotting at the famous Dawlish Sea Wall on a sunny day, exploring Rivet Games' infamously crap West Cornwall local route in real life, going to the Isle of Wight to see the Class 484 EMUs, and finally, riding along the full length of the London Underground's Bakerloo line. Believe it or not, all of those things I just listed off were still nowhere near all that I got to do in the UK. It was interesting seeing the buses in other cities throughout New Zealand, particularly those in Napier and Palmerston North, although I didn't ride aboard the latter's distinctive CRRC electrics. Thinking back to Napier, the only bus route I used there was the number 15, as that ran through the Ahuriri suburb, where I was staying, but I didn't like the bus's poor frequency and convoluted route that it took. As for Palmerston North, I was impressed by their bus network overall, especially since their main bus station is a damn sight better than the utter joke that we've got in Tauranga, but I didn't like how the route numbers were so similar to the point where you can easily get them mixed up. In my case, the main route I remember is the 107, which runs out towards the railway station, but for some reason I often get it mixed up with the 102 of all routes. As for rail fanning highlights in my home country, there's an awful lot to get through. For January, there was my journey behind A&G Price Shunter number 222 on the Waitara Railway, observing DL 9423 running light engine through New Plymouth, and seeing the Goldfields DBRs hauling a special train as part of the so-called Great Train Robbery event. Essentially, that just amounted to some cowboys and cowgirls ransacking all the passengers of their Cadbury Crunchy bars. For February, there was the extension of electrification from Papakura down to Pukekohe, which meant that we could now see the AM electric trains in a, by their standards, unusual, rural environment. I was the only railfan YouTuber to document TR-845's arrival on the Goldfields Railway. And the last highlight for February was catching the semi-recently overhauled DSG 3087 dead in tow on train 334S to Hamilton. March involved revisiting the rail scene in Napier, on which I hadn't been able to properly focus for a fair while. Going to the South Island and seeing DC 4755 in an unexpected quadruple header on train 939, then seeing brand new DM 8012 on a test run through Rolleston, followed closely by DXB 5137 leading a comically short train 925 to Dunedin. Throughout the 11 days in April that I had before going overseas, I didn't really see anything worthy of inclusion in the highlights reel, but it was a different story in May, as I was able to chase kiwirail's track evaluation rail car, ETM 432, when she made a rare visit to the Hautapu branch, a line that normally only sees DC locomotives hauling flatbeds loaded with white containers. June involved something very unusual indeed, when DC's 4853 and 4594 made two visits to the Bay of Plenty, a region whose railways are normally dominated by the newer DL class. Later in the month, we went down country and chased steam locomotive WW644 from Ohakune to National Park. That adventure was followed 2 weeks later by a longer trek down to Palmerston North, where we saw JB1236 on her first mainline run since 2019. There were only 2 major highlights in July, with the first one being the day when we saw the channel's namesake locomotive in action on the Waitoa branch. This happened to be the first time I had seen DC 4260 since June 2024. The second highlight of July happened only 2 days later, when we saw steam locomotive J1211 dead in tow on the main trunk. J1211 was an excursion star for many years through the 90s and into the 2000s, but has kind of faded from the public eye in all recent times, and last ran under her own power in 2018. August was another similarly quiet month to July, but one occasion I remember well was the day on which Dad and I chased DL 9020 on a fully laden log train from Kawero to Mount Maunganui. Later in August, I was in Auckland and managed to see, and film, a few of the brand new AM electric multiple units from the batch that was built in Mexico. The only major highlight of September was our visit to the Glen Afton line west of Huntly, where we found an extremely rare Climax geared locomotive in steam. Why these things were called Climax, of all names, is anyone's guess. In October, I got this pleasant shot of DL 9705 running past the cherry blossoms of Otu Moitai Gardens in the city of Tauranga, went to Helensville and got to have a look in DC 4260's cab, and saw the rail grinder ETM 798 in action 3 times. Twice in my local area, and once in Waharoa, on the other side of the Kaimai Ranges. November involved a second sighting of the recently overhauled shunter DSJ 4032 at work in Te Awamutu, seeing Mainline Steam's Bagnall 060 tank in action on Motat's Western Springs Railway, and later that same day, going trackside in Pairata, just north of Pukekohe, once again. As for December, that involved me finally seeing DSG 3210 in action for the first time since 2016. In those days, she was the main motive power for the S63 port shunt in New Plymouth. A few months before I saw her in late 2025, she had been fully overhauled at Hutt Workshops. The work involved installing a new remote control system, as indicated by the extra words on the cab side below the stripped-back kiwirail logo. Other major highlights in December were the unexpected sighting of AB608 and DA1410 on Christmas excursions along the Kapiti coast, visiting the Wellington Tramway Museum for the first time since 2022, and last but not least, getting more footage of the ex-British Rail Mark II coaches on the Wairarapa line.
whatsoever. So that's how it used to look.